Okay, welcome to today's zoning hearing board meeting. It's November 30th, 2021. We have one item on the agenda for tonight, and it's the continuance of appeal number 21-1906. If I remember last time we were here, I can't remember when it was, a good month ago, we had a presentation going on. Is he here, Mr. Bach? Oh, no. You're finishing up. No. Finish up. Oh, it's going to be different. Here, no, I'll cut it off. Don't do it.
Well, he wants to share this. Can you share this from the back?
We may need you back here, though.
Where you
Is
going?
that what you're contemplating?
You can't escape. There's no escaping.
No.
He was finishing up his presentation.
Yeah.
He's going to do it now. We ain't waiting. Yeah, he wasn't quite finished with his presentation.
You guys want to swear him in while we're waiting for this?
I think you're already sworn in from last time, right?
Okay.
Yeah, it only takes
I don't
one
know if it
time.
held over since August.
It's good for 60 days. And you're going to continue where you left off, right?
Oh, but I had 2 months for the extra slides. Just kidding.
I'm just telling you right now.
It's all relative. It's not about the surrounding properties or the neighbors' properties or anything like that. It's all about the property asking for the variance.
What would the Dutch have to have? Remember, we go to 10 o'clock tonight. That's it. Are we ready here for you, Mr. Bach? This is something you want to get started?
Yeah, we can start. Jim, can you just go back 1 or 2 slides so I can kind of figure out where I was at?
Yes.
Yeah.
Jim, can you just go back 1 more? All right, now you can go to the next one. All right. So this was just, I think that's where I left off last time. That was the recap of all the different variances and how they changed from the initial request to the second one. So these are my environmental concerns here. Obviously, everybody's concern is the flooding. Then you have the damage to the creek and trees falling, which actually a huge tree fell on this property the night after the last meeting because of the hurricane, which is basically what everybody in the community is concerned about with the creek. You got the sediment in Silver Lakes, and then you have, if you develop this, you're going to have all kinds of chemicals and stuff like that that could work their way into the water system in the community. You know, like the township puts out tweets about cleaning up your dog poop so it doesn't get into the waterways and stuff like that. If they have a dog or something like that, that could all get into the waterway because we're building basically right next to the stream. And then the other thing is the big question that we have is we have 2 experts. One says they're in the flood zone where they're projecting to build. The other one says they're not. So, I mean, my experience with waterways is they move. So because they're not in a flood zone now, it could be in the future. And you said in the last meeting, everybody makes mistakes. They gave themselves no margin for error because they're building right up onto that flood boundary line. So we can go to the next one. So this is just giving you some photos of what we're looking at. So right here, this is Woodland Drive. This right here is where they want to build the driveway. So you can see there's 1, 2 water inlets there, and there's 2 more down here. This is where they want to build the driveway. So they're going to take out all that landscaping, all those plants. They want to remove that, which is right now absorbing water. They want to replace it with a driveway. They're asking for a variance to have a narrower flagpole on their flag lot. So that water has to go somewhere. I imagine part of the reason for the width is so that you're not dumping water off the driveway into your neighbor's property. So then the question that I want to get to later is where's the water going from this big long driveway that they're putting that goes all the way past, probably back to there. So we can go to the next slide. So this gives you a view of the back of the property. If you recall, underneath where they're where they were trying to put the driveway, there's a drainage pipe. This is where it comes out right here. And you can see, then it comes down here, and then the creek goes like this. So you can already see the amount of erosion here. And what I'd point out is this tree right here is completely eroded already. So that's getting ready to fall, which I would consider a hazard tree, which to me, either the current or the future owners need to do something with that tree before it falls. Either injure somebody because there's kids that play back there a while, or blocks the creek, causing flood damage to surrounding properties. So that's what we have there. So we can go to the next one. Here's one. Anytime you go back there, there's probably deer. So here's a picture of the deer. Here's the property in general. So the deer are standing right about probably where their living room will be, by my estimation. So you can see it's not a huge slope. It's not a hill, but there's a gentle slope from the existing house all the way down to the creek. So any water that falls there is going to trickle its way down to the creek. So you can see this side right here, and this is a better photo of it. This side right here shows where the current owners of that lot have mowed the lawn all the way down to the creek. And you can just see all the erosion and all that soil ends up on the bottom of Silver Lakes, which eventually they're going to have to dredge out. So, and then you look on this side, it's more or less naturalized on the other side, right here. But the creek is in such bad shape, even where it's naturalized, there's erosion. It's just the erosion happens at a slower pace than it does on the other side of the creek where they have the grass that goes down to it. So we go to the next slide. So, I mean, I think I might have touched on this before. You know, removing these large trees is going to contribute negatively towards climate change. So these are just some basic facts here. A mature tree, 50 to 100 gallons of water per day. You remove those trees, that 100 to 50 gallons is going into the creek. It's just going to go under the surface into the creek because it's not going to be absorbed and released by the trees. 30 to 50% of the rain never hits the ground. It gets caught up in the trees, gets caught up in the bark and everything. So this is all what I'm saying is that this is going to add water to the creek. You add water to the creek, whether it's a gallon or whether it's 100 gallons or 1,000 gallons, you're creating more damage downstream to the property owners downstream. The fine roots quickly absorb the water too. So this is just more stuff from the EPA talking about how good trees are, which they're proposing to eliminate. We can go to the next slide. So this is their water mitigation calculations. This is what I got from the township. So if you look at it, he's saying that it's 200% of what's required, or just under 200%. If you look at his calculations, the rain garden is 128% of his calculations. If you look, you got trees, you got a rain barrel, other stuff. So these calculations right here basically show without the rain garden, and their mitigations is the bare minimum mitigation. It's not for like a huge storm. It's kind of for like your average thunderstorm is what they're mitigating for. So if you look at it, if you take the rain garden out, which their rain garden says it's 1,000 square feet, they're at 233 cubic feet below where they need to be, is what that's saying. So their whole proposal hinges on that rain garden working properly. So then we go tree canopy 48%. I think that was about 25% of their mitigation plan was trees. Planting new trees, the canopy of the trees. So Jim, can you flip out and play that video? You can start at about 1:20 from one of the zoning hearing board meetings, the first one that was supposed to happen. So I'll just hit on this right quick. So the new trees living there, their proposal for trees, it's a deeply shaded area, it's wet soil, and there's a ton of deer. So your actual percentage of chance of having a tree live there is very slim. And keep in mind, you have 4 surrounding properties that are all against this project. So if that's their plan and this does go through, we'll be watching those trees, make sure that they live, because that property will be under a microscope. So what I was hoping the video was supposed to show was, Jim, are you able to get in that video? Okay, so I'll tell you what the video was, and then we can get it to you. On the March 16th meeting of this year, which was the first meeting this was supposed to be happening, a person came in and they wanted to get a pool. Part of their pool plan was trees. And you said to him, trees don't count for this board. You have to dig the pit. That is what was said to another citizen, a citizen of Lower Makefield. So my question as a citizen is, if it doesn't count for that citizen, then why should it count for them? So I'm going to assume that if we take the trees out of their mitigation plan to make it fair for the citizen that had to dig a pit, we should take the trees out for his calculations. All right, so let's move on, Jim. And that's the March 16th meeting. I have that. We can look at that. So at the last meeting, I asked about gutters and their roof design. The reason for I asked this is specifically from this plan right here. You can see they're showing 1, 2, 3 downspouts that are feeding the rain garden. So if they know that the downspouts are right here, they should have an idea what kind of roof they have, right? I mean, I would imagine that's a fair question that they should have been decided. I mean, to me, it's very odd that 1, 2 of these downspouts are in the middle of walls. I mean, I walk my dog around Lower Makefield all the time. Very, very rarely do you see downspouts in the middle of walls like that. That's the reason I asked that question. So if you look right here, this is their rain garden. This all slopes that way. If you look right here, here's a rain gutter. If this house was here and we were proposing building this house, they would have to account for that water. They couldn't just let that water run down into the property behind it. So this water right now is just going to go right into that rain garden, which isn't in their calculations, I don't believe. What for sure? This is just public comment. I mean, they can ask questions. These are the experts. They can tell me if water is going to roll downhill or uphill. I don't know. So here's their rain gutter right here. And here's the rain gutter from the existing house. Here's the other one. If you notice, they're not in the middle of the wall. And it's going to go down, gradual slope down right into the rain garden. They can talk to whether it's not or whether it is going to go. I'm just saying the law of nature is you put water at the top of the hill, it's going to go downstream. So they didn't mention it in their presentation. I'll say that. So here's the other thing that's interesting. So I researched rain gardens. Most rain gardens are 4 to 8 inches deep. Their rain garden they're proposing is 12 inches deep. The reason they're 4 to 8 inches deep is because you have this open area in a yard. 4 to 8 inches is your normal step. It's a safety issue. Stepping down 12 inches is unnormal. It's a tripping hazard, especially if you have something filled with water. So, this is some examples of where I got it. This old house, trench. So then the other question is, you moved on me, I think. So you have a slight slope up, and to get the water to move in a certain direction, the pipe underground has to go down. So when I've researched how deep do you put those, most of them came around 10 inches, 12 to 14 inches. And these are the locations, Chicago Times, this old house. And the reason for that is in the wintertime, you don't want it freezing. You want it low enough where the water doesn't freeze in the pipe, which blocks up the pipe. So you got a 12-inch deep rain garden, slightly uphill from the home. Now you're running a pipe that's going down. I'm not even sure that the pipe opening is going to be at the level of the rain garden. These are things that I think that they should kind of explain and tell us that it's actually, their system is actually going to work if they're going to do it. So then we go to the next slide. So this is what I found really interesting. So this is from their thing too. So this equates to this. Their plans, if you remember, 1,000 square feet, rain garden. This is their plan, right? So I took this measurement, 54.8 feet, which is approximately this. This is 4.7, which is that. And then I calculated how large the rain garden was on their plan. And it's about 30% smaller than what they're projecting, than what they're claiming for in their mitigation plan. So I get it, just rough estimates, and this is, I imagine this is somewhat the scale. So I took this, it's 11 feet, that's about 11 feet wide, 684.3 square feet is what I got in a rough estimate. And that's not even including the rounding quarters. They're claiming 1,000. So what is it? Are they going to make that bigger? Or are they going to take the extra 300 feet out of their mitigation numbers? That's my question. So the leaf plan, this, and I had this all geared up in August. I mean, it's just perfect that it's right now, because go down the streets, if they don't have a plan for leaves, they're going to fail, because you could go to the next slide. This is the house to the left of mine. Go back, Jim. House next to mine, no rain gutters at all. My house, I have the larger gutters. There's two size gutters. I have the larger one specifically for the leaves. My next door neighbor, Helene back here, she has the gutter guards. All of them fail for certain reasons. If it's a high wind, my neighbor, well, this one doesn't fail because it doesn't do anything. It's just the water's just coming down and running wherever it wants to run. Mine, if a little twig or a stick, or if like now, if I don't clean them out, it'll still get clogged. When it clogs, the water doesn't go down the downspouts, goes over top. It won't, and in their situation, it would never even get to the rain garden. It would just go over the things. Hers, if it's a real windy or a real powerful downstorm, the water just runs right over the gutter and flies over the gutter if the rain is hard enough. That's why I asked why their gutters they were using. They should be able to account for the natural things that are happening. So this is just a simple thing. You sprinkler, hose, when you add all that impervious surface, you're creating massive, you're collecting water. You put a hose at the top of the hill, the water's going to go down much further, much faster, and create much more damage than if you have a sprinkler. This house, putting it on the wetlands buffer area, is the equivalent of putting a hose there, as opposed to what's happened naturally, which is a sprinkler. So we can go to the next one. So then this is what I was touching on earlier. One of their variances requests was to have a skinnier flagpole lot. I haven't seen anything as far as where they're shifting that water to. Are they pushing it this way, right into these drainage ditches that we are, right into these inlets that we saw earlier, which is going to inject all that water off that new impervious surface directly into the creek? Are they going to throw it to the seller's property, who's this area right here? Are they going to throw it to this neighbor's property? Where's that water going? So these drops right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, are the inlets. And if I'm not mistaken, their plan is to drain the rain garden into one of these inlets, which is basically, once that rain garden fills up, it's injecting all that water from that new impervious surface directly into the creek. Directly into the creek is where that water is going. And they're just saying it's going to have no impact, and they're going to be doing the community a favor by putting less water in. Nobody that lives on the creek is buying that. And then I don't even understand. They're putting, I guess, a rock ditch there to collect some water. I don't know. And then at one point in the presentation, he said they were going to trickle the water down here to where the outlet is, which to me, you're basically giving the water a shortcut to the creek. If it wasn't for all this new construction, the water would trickle down here to the creek, which is where it's at. So to me, I mean, that water's all going somewhere. And if they're dumping it into an inlet, they're dumping it directly into the creek. They're just directly injecting it into a vein to the creek. So we can go to the next one. So then in the last meeting, we were talking about how everybody makes mistakes. I just want to point this out. You look, if my understanding is correctly, this is the flood hazard line that they came up with. The other expert had the flood expert line further up this way. So who knows who's right? But when we're mistake prone people, they're not giving themselves any margin of error at all. If they're not 100% accurate on that, they're building on the floodplain, which is a big problem. So, and you got 3 points right here. You got right here where it's very close. I couldn't even put an arrow in there. You got this area right here, the corner, which is very close. And then you have, I guess this is the driveway that's very close. I mean, to me, this project makes no sense to me. It makes no sense why somebody would want to put themselves on a microscope. But as far as environmental issues, we got to make sure that they're accurate on that, and that's in dispute. So here's my unprofessional adjusted numbers. So you take these trenches here, you get rid of all the tree stuff, you readjust the rain pit or the rain garden for what they're showing and put it into a normal size, and they don't even hit the minimum. They don't even hit the minimum for a normal storm before you have a problem. The other thing that I'd like to point out that I missed is it looks like the rain garden has one of those pipes that comes up that collects the water when it fills up, and then the pipe, I guess, takes it to the inlet to dump it directly into the creek. So you can talk about the leaves too. What are they going to do when the leaves break, when the leaves clog that thing up? And you think that leaves might get absorbed into that, but these whole things have sticks. The sticks get in there, and then they block it, and then the leaves pile up behind it. So there's a number of issues that everybody that lives there now deals with on a regular basis that you'd probably never think about if you didn't live there. The other concern that I have is the water quality. So right now, squirrels, the birds or whatever, using the restroom on the roof, pooping all over the place, just goes into the grass and then it filters out. Anything that does any business on top of that roof, they're guiding it directly into that rain garden. So now they're collecting all that bird waste, the squirrel waste and everything, and it's concentrating into that area. So then when it does reach its maximum, all that dirty water is going to be lifted up, go down the pipe, and get injected right into the creek with no filtration at all. Yes, and bird poop. Don't forget about the bird. It's probably more the bird poop than the squirrel poop. So here's another thing. You want to talk about hardships? Lower Makefield's deer overpopulation problem. I think they just had a hunt over at the other place. Over what? All right, well, I'm just pointing it out for people watching at home. We're creating a hardship for the deer. All right. So you're displacing the deer with this. That's what you're doing. I know it's not your jurisdiction. Let's go. Hey, I mean, if it's going to get in the water, if we're talking about people picking up their dog poop in their yards to avoid it getting to the water, you don't think that if we concentrate all that stuff into a rain garden that has a pipe that goes, it's not going to affect the water quality? Talking about like it's all going to the same place. So you're talking about years and years and stuff. So here's another thing right here. This right here is a picture, June 1st, 2012. It is a eastern box turtle, which is considered an endangered species. So we can go to the next slide. That picture was taken back behind my house, like on the lot that they want to develop, is what that is. So here's a little bit. It talks about it being a threatened species from the IUCN organization. So we know that that turtle's there. These turtles don't move and relocate. They live in the same area forever. So this talks about the symbiotic relationship of the eastern box turtle and the mayapple plants. So it was interesting. Me and my wife went up to the wildflower preserve, the Bowman Sour Wildflower Preserve, and they're selling these mayapple plants. And I told the lady, I said, I thought that was a weed because my whole backyard is filled with these things every springtime. She goes, oh, you're lucky. You probably had box turtles because box turtles love those things. They eat the berries and the fruit that come underneath them. So that whole area where they want to develop is filled with that plant and most likely has these eastern box turtles on it. So you can go to the next slide. So this, I mean, this is the thing. And I showed a couple articles here. You can see this is the plant here. This flower, which is underneath, turns into a fruit, which is like the perfect height for a turtle to bite. The seeds are like 80% or something like that, more likely to turn into a plant if it goes through the digestive system of a turtle. So you have those animals there that are endangered species back on that property too. So for selfish reasons for myself, I mean, you drop, like I feel like my property value is going to be diminished if you drop a house right back there. I would say the same thing for some of the other neighbors as well. I mean, I moved to this piece of property for the backyard specifically. I knew what the zone codes were because, again, I moved from Falls Township and I had property at Falls Township. So I know what the kind of the codes are around the property. My expectation when I moved to the township was that the township would actually enforce their environmental codes, which we're debating right now and we've been debating since March. So that's my concern for selfish reasons. Like, I think my property value is going to be diminished because my house will be less desirable. And I know you guys have talked about it a lot. People buy next to farms. They don't want to have stuff. I'm just saying what you guys said. I mean, if you're saying it, then it counts. So this is the backyard, and this is about where they want to build the house right about there. That's my backyard. Those trees, by the way, they all came down in hurricanes. I didn't have one tree cut down. There was this tree right here. It was one of those split trees. And during one of the hurricanes, it split. So I had to have somebody come out and chop it up. That's the reason that's all chopped up. So then we can go to the next slide. So then quality of life. Again, you guys may not care, but it is what it is. You move to the township because you expect them to follow the rules. Like, I enjoy my backyard. I don't want to be looking at another house directly behind my backyard. Especially when you move here because there shouldn't be a house built on a wetlands buffer area. And now we're proposing building a house on a wetlands buffer area. So you guys are aware of that. That's all the variances that were requested. Is that it, Jim? So the community pretty much thinks that to build back there, it's too good to be true. And typically it is when you do that. So the whole entire community, I mean, you haven't heard anybody speak for this that I've heard. Out of 8 months of meetings, not one person's come up and spoke against it. You've had plenty of people come up and speak against it. But we feel typically every surrounding property except one is a party to this claim. We intend to fight this till our last option is exhausted. And if they do by chance build this thing, we will be on them, making sure that any agreements they made are executed and entirely. If they want to live like that, it's fine. But this project should never, if we care anything about our environment, this should not be approved. So again, this is just the side yards with the inlets. You going backwards, Jim? I thought that was over. Okay, that's it. That was my last slide. All right, thank you. I am passionate. You should see it.
17. Sure you recall that there was a extended discussion that was elicited by Mr. Fenningham about various notes on the plans that Mr. Gennady had prepared as part of our application, right? And a couple of specific notes in particular that you raised, and one was note 32 on Exhibit A4, which was our zoning plan. That, and also a survey plan where you indicated that those notes said that no field surveying had been performed, but rather the plans were based on graphic plotting, right?
Yes, the notes inferred that the location of the FEMA floodplain was done by graphic plotting. And then testimony that I had reviewed stated that it was a field run topography, but the plan did say that inferred that it wasn't tied to the FEMA.
Hold on. Can we pause for a second? The microphone. Thumbs up. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So you made multiple references to the fact that based on what you read of the notes, that you didn't believe that a field survey had been performed, and as a result of that, there were no tie-ins to FEMA benchmarks and the like, right?
Yes, that's what the notes appeared to me to say.
Right, those couple notes, right. And I think based on that, and there are multiple references in the notes of testimony in pages 24 and thereabouts, that even though there were FEMA benchmark information available, the lack of anything other than graphic plotting prohibited anybody tying those FEMA benchmarks to the plan, right?
When I would read the notes, that's the type of note that one would typically put on a plan if they did not tie into FEMA's benchmark.
Right. But is it still your testimony tonight, multiple months later, that the applicant didn't do a field survey?
I can't really tell what I think they did a field survey. I saw that in the testimony. I believe the topography is real. We actually used it in our analysis. Whether they tied into a FEMA benchmark, I can't tell. It did come out that we actually did our own independent survey.
Well, we'll get to that
And
also.
okay,
I don't want to cut you off. Go ahead and finish.
right. So when we got the results of our survey, it came in about 0.2 lower. So then it made me think that perhaps they did tie in, but it doesn't say they tied in, and it's too important to leave something like that undocumented. So that's why we went and checked the datum ourselves.
Okay. I'm going to call your attention to the zoning plan, Exhibit A4. Do you have that with you, Vince? I don't, Dave, do you want to call that up? If you have it, I think you should have it on the screen.
Jim might have that, right?
If not, we have a board. If Dave, Dave's got it. Okay. One before that, Dave, if you would. Okay. Justin, you want to get the board of A4? Okay, Vince, on the screen, and I think in front of you is Exhibit A4. For the board's benefit, what we've done is taken Exhibit A4, which is the zoning plan, and simply highlighted the general notes that were on that plan. And Vince, do you see note number 1?
Up on the board?
Yeah,
This plan,
and on Exhibit A4, it does not general note 1 say the plan has been prepared based on the references, including a actual survey done by Fortified Services LLC? You see that?
Yes, it says that the survey was prepared by Fortified Services. Yes, that's correct. So, and I did think that it was a field run survey. I think that was in Justin's testimony.
Okay,
It doesn't say anything about FEMA though.
well, let's take a look at also the next note on Exhibit A4. And if Dave would highlight that. Yep, next one, Dave, please. There you go. That's also the second sheet of Exhibit A4, and we've highlighted that note, which was on the plan from the very beginning, that talks specifically, again, about the fact that there was a field survey done and that the FEMA floodway and floodplain zone lines as depicted were aligned accurately with the topographic survey that was done. You see that note?
Yes, it's hard for me to read on the small scale. I just want to go up to the board and
Sure.
read it. Okay, that's easier.
Microphone, please, John.
The Alta survey that these notes refer to is Exhibit A7, is that correct? And that's the one with the corner legend about graphic plotting?
That's on the next one, right?
Okay.
But these two references, John, are from Exhibit A4, notes on Exhibit A4.
Right. But again, I'm just clarifying that these references to a survey are to Exhibit A7.
Yeah, they're also on, we're going to show that in a second.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, I do read note number 4, which still doesn't say that it's tied into the NAVD 88. It says that the
Okay.
floodplain line shown on this plan.
But again, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So it does say that they align accurately with the FEMA base flood elevation, but it doesn't say they were tied in, so it still could be an overlay.
I'm
type
going to
of
get to that.
situation.
But the point of the second page of Exhibit A4, if you look at note 3, it says the topographic information and existing conditions depicted on the plans were surveyed on January 25th, 2021 by Fortified Services LLC, right?
Yes,
Okay, so in two references on Exhibit A4, there is a specific reference to the fact that the property was in fact surveyed.
yes, field run topography, absolutely.
Okay, let's turn now to Exhibit A7 that Mr. Fenningham just made mention to. Vince, Justin will show you. All right, that's the A7 is the survey note, and we've highlighted it again for everyone to see. And if you want to take a minute to take a look at it, that would be fine.
Okay, and which note am I reading? 5?
Well, yes, 1 and 5 and 7, the ones that are highlighted in yellow.
Okay.
Right. Mhm.
I'm reading the notes as while I'm pausing here.
Tell me when you're done.
It does seem like there's a contradiction. I see note 5 that says that the bearings are referenced to PA State Plane Coordinate System, NAD 83, 2011 elevation shown hereon are reference to the North American vertical datum of 1988 established via RTK GPS,
Right.
which is good, but it seems to be in conflict with the flood note in the bottom left, which says by graphic plotting only.
So you acknowledge, at least based on the survey note that we've just highlighted, that there was an actual field survey done of the property and that GPS was used and that the survey was in fact tied to FEMA benchmarks. Those three things, right? Will you now, today, would you acknowledge that those three things exist and we're done?
Well, I think I would still be confused because it seems to conflict with the other notes that say it was not, that it was by graphic plotting only. And that's part of the problem is that I'm not sure whether it was or it wasn't. I do see the note where it reads NAVD 88, and then I see in other places No field survey work was done to establish a floodplain. And that, like an owner beware that you might have to establish a floodplain on your own later. Notes to that effect on the same exhibits. So it seemed to me that I was unsure of what was going on with it, actually.
Okay. So I'm clear. Your testimony is that today that no field survey was done or not?
No, I believe that the field topography, was run in the field. And when I was first reviewing the exhibits, I couldn't tell if it was tied into NAV 88, the FEMA benchmark or not.
That's what okay. So you don't accept as accurate the survey note that we just shared with you, right?
Yes.
Did you hear that? So he's answered that question, and his answer is the notes are conflicting on the surface. And so he says, in his opinion, it doesn't confirm that the field survey work tied into the FEMA benchmark when it says this was only graphic plotting.
In that one little note there at the bottom, there seems to be a conflict, is what you're saying, which could really just be boilerplate language, because I deal with a lot of plans all the time. So all the time, sometimes those things are not taken out. But you have the bigger note that does seem to indicate that it was done. I understand what he's saying.
Right.
But doing a lot of plans myself over many years, a lot of times stuff like that never gets taken off the plan, and the notes would supersede that. But I'm not exactly sure what he's looking at there, but
Right.
from what it sounds like, that's what Vince is conflicted about.
And I'll come back to where Ed started with Exhibit A4 and the Note 32, which says no field survey work was
We agree.
performed.
We agree. And I thought, and Vince, I'll ask you, were you present during Mr. Giannotti's direct testimony and cross-examination by Mr. Fenningham, or did you read the transcript of his testimony?
I do believe I reviewed it, and I remember first thing we saw was some conflicting information. Was it tied in? Wasn't it tied in? And I remember Justin saying that it was field run, but I don't recall anything clear.
Well, you
about-
recall him saying that Note 32 and the other note that you highlighted in your testimony were in fact boilerplate notes that should have been removed from that plan before it was submitted and weren't?
Yes, yeah, I do remember that. Yes.
Right. So assuming that you agree, as Justin does, that it was a mistake to add those several notes, would you then agree, if those notes didn't exist, that the more current specific survey note and the other notes we highlighted tonight would be those that would be relied upon?
At a deposition, I'd object to that question. It's compound. I'm just afraid that the answer is not a yes or no.
Well, why
Just
don't you
wanna
let him say whether it's a yes or no?
Yeah. Let him answer.
I think in this situation, with the floodplain being so close to the house and such a critical issue,
Right.
That kind of error or oversight on the notes that conflict and something so important would lead me to have a doubt, and that's why we ended up calling for our own independent surveyors to come out and check it for
All right,
ourselves.
let's talk about that. You indicated in your direct testimony that you had your own field survey done. Is that right?
Yes, actually, I couldn't get my crew there in time, so I hired Kavanaugh Surveying from Doylestown
Right.
to come out and check the elevations of certain things that we could compare.
But I think
to.
you testified that you had your own field survey done, right?
Yes, but I subcontracted it to.
Yeah,
Kavanaugh.
no, I understand that, right. Did your subcontractor survey crew go on the subject property?
No, they stayed in the street and compared, and the elevations that we procured are shown in our exhibits. They compared the top of grade elevations, manhole elevations, and the intersection, which are hard elevations that we can easily compare. So we had them locate those for our comparison.
And would you agree that the opportunity to rely upon GPS in performing a survey would provide a higher degree of accuracy than if you didn't?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, Justin has testified and the plans indicate that his field survey actually on the property itself was done with GPS, correct?
Yes,
Was your survey done with GPS?
yes,
It was,
yes.
even though your testimony suggests that you could not get GPS equipment to do it.
No, we use GPS on the inlets and manholes out in the intersection of Woodland Drive which are shown on your plan of survey so we could compare without any other instruction. I didn't tell them why I was surveying it or what, I told them what datum I wanted the elevations on, and that was it. They had no plans, and they got the elevations, same elevations that are shown on your plan for the same inlets. And overall, they're about 2/10 lower.
But your testimony back in August was on page 12 that actually in this situation, we are tying into a FEMA benchmark and we actually had to hire an outside firm. We couldn't get the GPS equipment fast enough, so I was assisted by a field survey crew, right?
Yes, and they have their own GPS equipment, so they brought it with them. When we
Okay.
do the GPS surveys, we rent the equipment, and I couldn't get it fast enough. So that's why we hired them to come out immediately and take it, because the hearing was coming quickly. So
Okay.
it is GPS, it is NAVD 88, and we shot elevations that I could easily compare to the elevations on this plan. Because remember, at that time, I wasn't sure whether we tied in, we didn't tie in, and being 2 feet from the floodplain, it makes a big difference. So that's why we checked it, and we ended up with about 2/10 lower.
Are you challenging that, or were you challenging at the time? And are you still challenging tonight the fact that if there was no field survey done, there was no way to tie into the FEMA benchmark?
My challenge would be, my concern was that if the survey was not tied into a FEMA benchmark, then all the comparisons would be very approximate and couldn't be relied on.
Right. So are you saying that you don't believe our plan of survey was tied to a FEMA benchmark?
Now I do believe that you did get an elevation, from NAVD 88 from GPS, and we also did, and we're about 2/10 lower. And my point with that was the site is so flat and so close, and the proposal so aggressive, being 2 feet from the floodplain, just to show if I use our elevation versus same topo that you ran, but I lower it by 2/10, where the floodplain moves. So for every 10th, if you have a slope that's about a 1.5% slope next to the stream, for every 10th, you move over 7 feet. So if I'm 2/10 different, that's 12 to 14 feet over where the floodplain will be. And it's different if you have a steep site and you're 2 feet from the floodplain, but you're 30 feet above it. But if you're an inch above it and you're 2 feet away and our elevations are 2/10 lower, then the floodplain just moved over 14 feet. And now it's in the middle of your garage. It's just a flat site, very sensitive to elevation. If you have a 1% slope on a property next to a floodplain and the water gets a foot higher, it goes 100 feet over. So it's very sensitive, and the 2 feet, I think, is a big concern. Just to show you the sensitivity, our numbers at 2/10, 3 or 4 inches different, and it's 15 feet over.
Is it your testimony that your survey, which nobody has ever seen, is more accurate than the survey undertaken by the applicant, recognizing that his survey was done on the property itself and yours wasn't? Ours was done with GPS, yours may have, may not have been, we haven't seen it. And ours were tied into FEMA benchmarks, and we don't know if yours was or wasn't. You say it was, but we haven't seen it. So you're challenging the accuracy of our survey based on that, right? Well, he can multitask.
Well,
He
no, no,
understands it.
what, the, no, it's a different question. It's a different question, but the actual question, I think you just need to restate the question, because the preamble to the question, I think, got lost with the question, but I would otherwise allow that.
Sure. I'm asking, all right, I'll try to restate it. Do you believe that your survey, which we have not seen, is more accurate than the survey that Justin's office and the applicant prepared, based on the facts that I've previously reviewed and which you've confirmed?
I believe that our survey is as accurate. It was done with GPS by a professional surveying firm in Doylestown and did come up with a slightly different result. I think the result, being as close as it is, confirms that you probably tied, even though the notes say different things, that you probably did tie in with the GPS, as did we. And we didn't produce a separate document. We just literally took 5 or 6 elevations that are shown on my exhibit, you can see the elevations that we produced on the same inlets that are on your survey, and you can see that they're all lower. And that may be typical that the elevation accuracy for the GPS instruments, plus or minus a tenth or so, but just goes to show that this floodplain model with a flat site, if I get an elevation from a satellite and another firm gets one and they're a tenth different, that water just moved over 10 feet. So proposing a dwelling 2 feet from the floodplain is a risk. And that's essentially, I want to confirm that we're on the same benchmark, and I think we are, and our elevations are lower, and our floodplain's 12 to 14 foot higher because of it. And that was essentially what I was trying to illustrate.
Okay. And I won't belabor it anymore, but one last question. If you were not on the site, which you acknowledge your survey crew was not, how do you identify with as much accuracy as our survey did, actual elevations of individual contours on that property?
Okay, well, what I actually did was I used the GPS to check the tie into the FEMA datum, and ours is like, again, about 2/10 lower. Now, in terms of the survey, the topographic survey that was produced for your exhibits, I actually used that topography. So I'm using the same topography that you produced. All I did was show what 2/10 difference will do to this. So when I look at my exhibits, when I look at the exhibits that I had produced, I think exhibit 1 or 2 was showing where it's say 88.2 would land on between the two contours. I'm using your contours and your field run topography. I'm accepting that as accurate. But now I'm showing you where, reading those contours, where that water line would go. And that's the exhibits that I have. I don't know if you want to go through those or not. So I'm actually using your contours to show where I believe the floodplain would be.
So to clarify, you're using his contours with adjustment of 2/10 based upon what your survey was.
Yes.
Following
And I
up
show
on that-
with and without the 2/10, and I still think it's in the floodplain.
Following up on that, was the crew under the jurisdiction of a PLS,
Yes.
not yourself, some other PLS?
Yes, I met them out there. I showed them what I wanted. And it's a professional surveyor, Kavanaugh and Doylestown. I have the invoice here.
And are you submitting a sealed drawing that states that information?
There was no drawing produced. It was just elevations that I used on our exhibit, and I have the invoice from that firm.
Okay.
That we can,
But you're not going to put
Submit.
your seal on any of the numbers that you're discussing?
no, I can. I mean, they're a sealed firm. They have PLS guiding the firm. All they do is survey work, very good at it, multiple crews. And they own all the GPS equipment. I knew I could get them there faster.
I
than
get that, but as a licensee myself,
Mhm.
if you don't say you're going to put your seal on it, I don't have a lot of.
I have no problem sealing their results.
Okay, thank you. Question to you, Justin. What's the density of the survey, point density on the survey that you guys did in the field?
I don't have that information on me. I could actually get that from the surveyor record and provide that to you, but I don't have that with me at this time.
Vince, I'm assuming, no, I won't assume. Your testimony was that the house, in your opinion, or at least some portion of the house, is located in the floodplain. And as a result of that, you believe the improvements, including the house, would alter stream flows, increase peak rates, redirect flows, and impact downstream property owners, right?
Yes.
Would you still have that same opinion if the house was not located in the floodplain, as our survey indicates?
If the house was not located in the floodplain, then it wouldn't alter the 100-year flow. But from what I see and from what I believe it is in the floodplain.
I know that.
but-
I know that's what you said, but
Right.
assuming that our information that we've submitted is accurate, that no portion of the house is in the floodplain, the adverse consequences that I just summarized that you stated would not exist, right?
I mean, he's an expert, so you can ask.
Well, there's another issue. If a structure is not located within the 100-year floodplain. So during the 100-year storm, that's where the water surfaces, of course, is running down the stream. If the dwelling's not located in the flow of the water, it won't redirect the water. But I still believe that the stormwater improvements proposed would cause an increase in peak flows. This proposed stormwater system was designed for the exemption that typically is granted when a site has less than 5,000 square feet of impervious surface. You know, small projects, small impacts, no flooding areas, not adjacent to a stream. That exemption might be granted. I think in this case, and the public comment did a good job of showing it, the driveway, the impervious surfaces will go right into the stream. There's no peak rate mitigation. So I think it would still have an impact. It just wouldn't be directing the flows if it wasn't in the floodplain, but I do believe it is in the floodplain. And I don't think you can model the floodplain to be 2 feet or 1 foot from a house and rest assured that you have it that accurate. I don't think it can be done that accurately.
Okay.
Vince,
No, he's
can
gonna,
I refer to you as Ed? Ed asked repeatedly that, or said repeatedly that your survey crew was not on the site. Could you just clarify where the survey crew was? They, instead of being on the flag lot, where were they?
They were at the intersection of Woodland Drive and West School Lane.
And without going on to the flag lot, and in a sense, not asking for permission to do so, were they, is it your expert opinion that the survey results are true and accurate?
Yes, absolutely.
You were referred to Exhibit A4, which was the Ursumer zoning plan presented by the applicant. And Note 4 on that plan has the words, and I believe you referred to them already as, quote, aligned accurately, end quote. Does those words implicate field work or graphic plotting?
They implicate graphic plotting, and they seem to align with the other notes that we found, and we had discussed this previously, that seem to indicate that the floodplain was approximate. And again, there could be boilerplate notes, or the tying in with GPS could be a boilerplate note. I mean, I really didn't know, but in this situation, it's so critical that we had to check it ourselves.
And let me just ask, I want to clarify, we're prepared to supplement our presentation with Vince's seal upon those exhibits, verifying his acceptance of the survey results. But let me ask this question, just to be clear. Did you incorporate the survey results into your exhibits VF2 and I believe VF, let me double check. VF2, which is referred to as a revised floodplain line, stated August 17, the day that Vince testified before you. And VF3, showing the points to the right. Why don't you explain what your point is?
Yes, I'm referring to VF3, and you can see our elevations in blue that are adjacent to the elevations that were submitted by the applicant. Again, at the intersection of Woodland Drive and West School Lane, whenever you're comparing elevations from a datum or a benchmark, you need fixed surfaces that won't move, typically manhole rims, inlet grates, bridge wall abutments, those kind of things. So we were able to compare our elevations to the known elevations on the applicant's exhibit, and that's all I really needed to do to compare the elevation difference.
Now, you're right. I sent that to you. You have it? Okay. These four exhibits were admitted into the record on August 17th.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. Thanks. Now, Why don't you, would you put this one up? I want to have on the board VF 2 and 3. So 3 first and then 2. And then I have a new exhibit that'll tie into the cross-examination. And 3. All right, it may be hard to see there, but can.
Okay, first I looked at the intersection here, and you can see the elevations that we picked up from our GPS survey and compared them to the elevations that the applicant had. And that's where about the 0.2 difference came. Again, and it's probably easier to even explain with this one, which was that VF1. Sure, sorry. Sorry about that. This is VF2. Again, and this is just kind of a rehash of what we spoke about before. When we look at elevation 88.1 from the cross section, and then this flood hazard area was plotted as being level, and we know from my first exhibit that there is a slope to it. And I think there was a mention about 88.2, and it's 2 feet from the house. And when you look at, we talked about the sensitivity. When you look at the difference between 88 and 89, if you can see the yellow contours, where the contours are close, of course, it's a steeper slope, and 1/10 doesn't matter as much. Where you have a 1.5% grade, it's even between the two contours. Each one's about 6, 8, 7 feet. So 88.2, even using their data, would be here where the house is. Now I read the graph at 88.3, which would put it here, without talking about my survey work at all. And then if I went and I lowered it by 0.2, because ours were 0.2 lower, now I'm over here and I'm in the middle of the house. Yes, yes. Yes, now if we used our data, which was 0.2 lower, and if I didn't use our data and I just used their field run topography, I'm still in the house. So.
Would you just point that the 88 elevation is depicted on this, but just in a dark or a light hash line right there, yellow? Did I ask you to prepare a more graphic depiction of those various elevation lines? All right, and did you prepare that?
Yes.
And when did you prepare that?
Finished it today or yesterday.
Did you provide it to me tonight?
Yes.
I didn't get
You
it.
have copies of all of them except for VF5, right?
Explain that exhibit and why you did what you did.
It's trickier than it looks.
Yeah, I can see the water.
That's why I'm going to help. Oop. Yeah.
That's a little better.
Do you want to go back to 2 or 3?
No.
So essentially, this is being referred to as VF5. It's just adding additional information to the other exhibit that we had, where we just showed the water surface elevations. You can see on this exhibit, there's a set of polylines that are red, and that would be based on our 0.2 lower elevation. And the blue lines are the applicant's topographic lines from their survey. And again, what we have here, the dashed line is the 88 contour of the applicant, and the 89 contour of the applicant is the other purple dashed line. And here's how the tenths go between them. Now, if it was, if our elevations were correct, and it is 0.2 lower, the entire surface moves up a little. So you can see the same exact pattern, but it's just shifted about 12 to 14 feet uphill. So you can see the water surface elevation through the house. I think without our survey and using their data and plotting it using their contours, I'm still hitting the house. And so my point basically with this is, on a flat surface, 2 feet or 1 feet from the floodplain, you cannot model it that accurately. And I could be 0.2 different. I might be right. What if mine are 0.2? Maybe it's 0.2 lower, and it's even up here further. So it's just very dangerous. have a dwelling a foot from the floodplain. Unless you're 10 feet higher than it, then it doesn't matter. So that was the essence of this exhibit. And we did have another exhibit that showed,
If I may, what is the identity of that exhibit?
VF5.
I mean, what are you calling it?
I don't have it, Barbara.
Is it a-
I asked Vince the date, he didn't update that, Ed. It's August 11, but no, it's not last revised.
What's the, oh, go ahead. You're so close here.
Mhm.
What is the margin of error in survey?
I think it depends on the type of survey, the type of instrument. Typically with a GPS receiver, when they're getting this from satellites, it's a couple of inches, a tenth or two is about what they'll typically tell you. Now, we took two separate readings on the same exact grates and multiple readings, and we're about 2/10 lower. When the old days when we used to do it with field run topography, we'll come in at 100th, but now we're going outer space and we're getting the benchmarks from another state, and that you get within a couple of tenths. So I illustrate that it's a big deal if you're on a low lying, proposing a dwelling 2 feet from a floodplain, because it's a 1% slope and 6 inches up is a long way over. I think it's about a tenth. Yes. So I don't know, maybe mine really are a tenth lower. I mean, even if we take a tenth off of mine, it moves up another 7 feet. So if you have a flat site, and I have another cross section on there that we discussed last time, flat site's a big deal. If I'm up on a cliff and I look down and I'm a foot away, who cares?
Right.
But, so that was the whole point of this, is that it's a computer model where this 100-year floodplain is. And the other thing too, I think needs to be mentioned is regarding trees. Trees planted that aren't in the floodplain help in every way. Trees planted in the floodplain block the flow of the water. So when you do have a 100-year flood, if I plant enough trees, I'm blocking the stream, and it's going to slow it down, make it higher, make it spread wider. They're going to fall over. It creates a potential for damming. So I think planting trees in the floodplain, if you're looking to reduce the floodplain height and the width, we're going to get them out of there. You need to convey the water. So I think the planting of trees for water quality improvements is a good idea when your whole site is upstream and you're, catching the water and getting your water quality credits. You plant those trees in the middle of the stream or in the floodplain where the water's trying to get away, and you're just blocking it up, slowing it down, and now it's going to get deeper and wider. So I don't think that type of stormwater management applies to a site that is in the floodplain.
You're concerned that it's so close.
Yes.
I
Yes.
understand.
You can't say that
In
it's
your
that close. You
opinion,
don't know
so
where it is.
close.
Accepting their data, accepting the applicant's data. They're just so close, 2 feet, I think Justin said.
Well,
But
even accepting the applicant's data and then
It still comes in.
interpolating, it's still hitting the house. The way I interpret it, it's the blue line.
But you got to get a chance to cross on your redirect. So let him, when you do that, find out from him. But I
Hold on to that.
appreciate your concern.
Would you go back up?
Ben's question for you.
But with
Ben.
just,
Are you a CFM?
I was going to ask more questions.
Yes.
But go ahead if you have a question.
I asked it. Are you
Oh,
a
okay.
CFM?
Yes.
And what's the difference between a floodplain and a floodway?
A floodway is when you encroach on both sides and the elevation goes up a foot.
And what's the purpose of a floodplain versus a floodway?
The floodplain and floodway provides municipalities some kind of compromise where you can do some limited fill in the floodplain.
No. In an actual flood, forget about governments.
Mhm.
What's the purpose of the two?
Of the floodway?
Yes.
It keeps encroachment to the point where the elevations in the stream will not increase more than a foot from
Okay.
encroachments.
And so that's the transport method of where the flood water is going. And the floodplain is the storage.
Turn that
portion of
phone
it,
off, please.
Correct?
Yeah, the floodplain is where the stream would naturally flow to carry the 100-year storm.
It's more storage than flow.
It's more storage, but as you start to encroach upon it, of course, the elevation rises. You get to the point where you're a foot above, and then that's the floodway line that you really have to have a good reason to encroach past that. It's just kind of where the limit of it is. They try to keep, encroachments in floodplains to a minimum, but realizing that you have to do it sometimes for bridges and different projects and sewer pump stations and all that. So there's some play in it, but they had to limit it somewhere. So if you'll see the line where the floodway is, that's a foot higher. You start to fill on both sides, starts to rise up a foot, then they stop it. Or you have to have you got to be the military or something. Yeah, go past that. But so that's where that all is. But even if you're going to fill in the floodplain, probably the ordinance has provisions in there. Let's say I'm going to fill in the floodplain and I'm required to do a study and we're going to put the house in there and the elevation is only going to go, even if the house is in the floodplain, it's only going to rise 6 inches, let's say. Then the study would usually say, well, what's 6 inches going to do in height to the people around you?
Mhm.
And if you can prove that it's not going to hurt them, that's one thing. If it is, then you have to do something else to mitigate it, replace the bridge downstream that's too small, something. But, that's kind of where that whole thing I usually see is.
Good, Matt?
Vince, would you just, I want to clarify that you said if the 1/10 adjustment, whatever, your line in red would be lower. Just to
Yes,
clarify, that means that line would be further into the house location. Is that,
right. The red line shown on the plan would be if we used our elevations, which are 2/10 lower.
but that would mean it would go to the
Higher.
right, it would go higher into
Higher on the house, yes, because the water elevation is set. And now if the ground gets lower, the water moves up higher.
And this exhibit was also prepared to illustrate the contour, the location of the elevation 88, which on the applicant's plan is a straight line across the parcel. Do you agree that that's a proper depiction of a straight line elevation?
No, I don't. It's not a straight line. I don't know if it came up in testimony, but the flood hazard on the plan is labeled at a level elevation of 88. And as you can see from the profile, that's water surface elevations. They're not level. The further upstream you go, the higher they are. And I think even on one of the exhibits I saw where the geo-reference line on their application was 88.1, and then 40 feet over was the edge of the house, and that was 88.2. And so then I took their elevations and their topography, and I just plotted where 88.2 would be, assuming a constant slope between the two contours. And that's where I got that first blue line.
But if I may, let me approach this, not to get in the way here. What I'm asking, if you could come around, this yellow line appears to be straight in that sense on this exhibit.
Yes, and that's labeled flood hazard. That's the 88 contour.
And is that accurate depiction on the applicant's plan that shows that just being off of a foot or two from the house, a straight line? Or is it actually, in your expert opinion, is it actually curving with the contour of the actual land topography?
Yes, it was depicted here as flood hazard 88. And in my opinion, it's not a static 88. It goes uphill. And the blue line is where this is 88.1. I'm pointing to the first tick in this line here. And then it goes up to 88.2. Well, actually 88.2 would be here, the second line. And I actually read the graph as 88.3, which puts it here. So depicting the flood hazard at 88 all the way across the site is not correct. It really does rise up. And a 10th is a big deal here.
Now, let me bring it back to the graphic plotting issue. Is this a reason, this depiction of a straight line, flood hazard line being inaccurate? Does that support, this depiction supports your opinion that there was not a tie-in to the FEMA benchmark, that this tie-in is more accurate? Is that your testimony?
I'm using their topography. I believe this is the accurate line for the flood elevations shown on the FEMA profile. And that's assuming that they're on the correct datum. Now, the fact that it was plotted horizontally at 88 is just an error. And again, it's not a big deal if you're 30 feet higher than it, but if you're right next to it, it's a big deal. And you can see why. So we just tried to get more accurate using their exact topography and their elevations and everything. And I was still hitting the house. and then I was reading 88.3. And then we did the field survey check, and that pushed me another 12 or 14 feet up.
So in your expert opinion, this line, which is attempting to show that the BFE, base flood elevation, it does not intersect with the house, is completely in error.
I believe so, yes.
Let me slip by you guys. Would you, is it your opinion that that depiction is result oriented to have it outside of the proposed location of the house?
Well, it's shown to be exactly at the house, where the flood hazard area is. And I don't think it's correct. And I did plot what I feel to be the correct line.
I'm going to shift gears for a minute on a subject that we were asked to come back to you on. The 4 videos that we showed you on August 31 had specific dates, which I'll tie into my questions. The question, overall question is, Vince, did I ask you to gather rain data, and did you do that?
Yes.
So with regard to the first video, which showed the storm event of August 14, 2018, did you determine whether that was a mild storm, middle storm, severe storm, whatever way you would characterize it?
Well, the closest rain gauge I got to the property had 2.96 inches of water in that 24-hour period.
And what does that translate into for a measuring?
It's typically about maybe a 2 to 5 year storm. A 2-year storm can vary from 2.3 maybe to 3.2 inches. So maybe a 2-year storm.
Would you say that's an average rainfall?
Yeah, once every 2 years statistically.
The next video was August 17, 2019. Did you secure reliable data, in your opinion, of the rainfall amount for that date?
Now, the weather stations in the area had no records on that day, so they must not have been out of power or not operating.
The third video was on August 4, 2020. Did you secure rain data for that date?
Yes, 2.96 again, exactly the same number that I got on the 2 years earlier. Again, about a 3-year storm. I mean, a 2-year storm, 3 inches of water.
And so what was depicted in the video shown to the board was not a severe or 100-year storm event.
Correct.
It was not.
It was not.
The fourth date was July 12, 2021. That was the last video. Did you secure rain data for that date?
Yes.
And what is that?
2.2, a little bit less than a 2-year storm. And again, the point here is that none of them were a 100-year storm, which would be 3 times that bad. So if it was really a 100-year storm, it'd be a lot more water than what that video showed.
And you've already identified the crew, the survey crew as Kavanaugh. Did you, you have, did you, and I say you, did your company engage Kavanaugh surveying services of Doylestown, Pennsylvania, as you testified?
Yes.
And did you, were you invoiced by Kavanaugh?
Yes.
And did you pay that invoice?
Yes.
Is this a true and accurate copy of the invoice in question?
Yes, it is.
I'd offer this as VF6. Okay. Okay. And we'll provide it later. Okay.
Thank you.
In answer to some of the questions that the board members raised tonight, I would reserve, but I'll ask a question. Can you secure calibration confirmation from Kavanaugh Surveying with regard to their GPS equipment?
Yes, I can.
And so we will submit that to the board.
The calibration of the equipment used that day,
Correct.
Yes, exactly.
Correct.
so they calibrate it every time they
Yep.
use it.
Yeah.
A report of what they did and
Just
what
check-
instrument they used and all that.
And I believe the testimony was August 10, was Vince said a week before the August 17 hearing, but it's around August 9, August 10.
So what do they do? Have a document that they put the calibration on, stamp?
Yeah, it's the certification letter for the results that
Okay.
they gave to
Just
me.
curious.
And in fact, did you already ask for that at my request?
I did, and I was supposed to have it before tonight.
And you didn't receive it,
Yes.
but we'll get it. If you bear with me, I just,
No, go ahead, John.
Is there any concern on your part, in your expert opinion, with the base flood elevation or elevations as you've described in relation to the proposed location of the rain garden?
Yes, I had an exhibit, it might be VF3, where I showed in the event that we're correct with where the floodplain line would be, what would happen during a 100-year storm. Again, I discussed that the stormwater measures shown on this plan are using the stormwater exemption for a small project. In my opinion, none of it works when there's a stream raging around the house. I think for water quality, if it's, a 1-year storm on a sunny day, the rain garden will take some water and things will work. I think if it starts to get ugly down there, it's not going to work. And I think it'll make things worse because it'll be redirecting water and a bunch of other impacts, adding more water to the stream, increasing peak rates, things that it's not designed to do because it's being looked at as a small project.
So because of the exemption, you still feel that even though there's an exemption, there shouldn't be.
Right. In this situation, I can't see an exemption when you're that close to a stream.
And we heard the board members say the zoning board does not make that determination, but just presenting to you Vince's expert opinion that that exemption should not be granted.
I got it.
And he did, yeah. But he also testified about the 2-mile, just reiterate that point.
Yes, there was another exhibit, and I can flip it in case it was a month or two ago. And this might be VF4. Is that how that was marked? The distance from the site to the river, 6,964 feet. An ordinance section under resource protection. If any of the following site-specific criteria are applicable, the township shall require an independent environmental impact assessment as set forth in the appendix to this chapter. And under 7, it says wetland abutting a watercourse terminating in the Delaware River less than 2 miles from the site, and we're 6,900 feet from the river. So it seems to require an independent environmental analysis for like the wetland buffers and the other variances that are requested.
And based on what you've observed to be the presentation and exhibits on behalf of the applicant, that study has not been presented to the board.
I haven't seen one.
Okay. I have no further questions on redirect.
Okay.
I asked for your indulgence. If there's further cross-exam, I may have a question. If there's additional presentations by the applicant tonight or the next hearing, I may want to recall Vince.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. And Ed and I discussed that, just so you understand, Ed completed his cross-exam of Scott McDonald on August
Last time,
31. I
yes.
think Barbara did as well. I was going to call Scott. He, for employment-related reasons, has been inaccessible to me for the last 3-4 weeks. So I also talked to Adam and said I request the right to reserve the possibility of recalling Scott on redirect, but we're not prepared to do that tonight. And my understanding is Ed has no objection to that.
I have no problem with that.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's probably be more efficient rather than continuing to cross Vince if we just had some rebuttal from Vince or from Justin about VW5, et cetera. Justin, you've obviously been.
Microphone, please.
You've obviously been present this evening and you've heard Vince's testimony, both in my cross-examination of him and in Mr. Fenningham's redirect of him, right?
Correct.
Okay. And again, so that there's no misunderstanding. The property, in fact, was field surveyed.
Correct.
The property, in fact, was surveyed utilizing GPS techniques.
Correct.
And the property was subsequently tied into FEMA benchmarks.
Correct.
Okay. And you acknowledge that several notes that were highlighted early on were placed on the plans A4 and A7 in error.
Correct.
We're done with that. Let's focus on some of Vince's testimony this evening related to VWF5 and certain assumptions that Vince described tonight that both he and the survey crew made as they relied on certain of your information to develop their own. All right.
Sure. So to start off, I will say that our survey is accurate to within 1 inch. That is standard survey practice. So that is less than a tenth. It's 0.08 is the accuracy of surveys. So just to start off, and I'm going to approach the exhibit if I may.
Yeah. Just to describe for Mr. Campbell's benefit what exhibit you're referring to.
I'm going to be starting with VF5, the exhibit that I'm seeing for the first time tonight. But this is he's supplementing an exhibit that was previously submitted, so I feel comfortable weighing in here. So Mr. Fioravanti did acknowledge that he field surveyed the perimeter of the property. He never accessed the actual property itself. Now, a couple of things when it comes into the testimony about checking into field shots of our survey. A lot of you heard Mr. Fioravanti say that they were checked in by fixed objects. That means inlets, manholes, fixed objects on site. There's several different areas on an inlet where you can actually shoot the inlet. And when you're talking about a tenth, I know we're talking about on the property, where you shoot the inlet and whether how plumb or your rod is when you're shooting it can have an error within an inch or within a tenth or so of when you're shooting it. So we do have a site benchmark out there. I'm not sure if Mr. Fioravanti checked into the site benchmark, but conveniently all of them are saying they're 0.2 lower. So I will say that there's many different areas where you can shoot an inlet. It's supposed to be center back. I don't know where they were shot. There was never a signed sealed survey presented to us where we could compare the shots of where they were taken. There's no sealed survey to say that the Mr. Fioravanti or Mr. Kavanaugh will, I know you can provide it, but we haven't seen it and it's never been provided so we can match up where the shots were taken in relation to ours. Now, Mr. Fioravanti said he didn't access the property. He's just using our field data. Now, the problem with what he did here is that he's assuming that there's a constant slope across the whole property. That doesn't happen. If you notice in existing contours, contours vary. That's why you go out there and you do a field survey. You run lines down the survey and you pick them up and you build a surface based on field shots. Contours are not evenly spaced as Mr. Fioravanti has here. It's not, you don't have an 88 contour, then you have an 89 contour and it's evenly spaced in increments through it. We have on our plan, and it is circled here, it says 88.2 survey spot shot. That means it was field located in the field 88.2. So he's saying that the 88.2, he being Mr. Fioravanti, excuse me, is saying that the 88.2 contour hits at the second tick mark. That's not correct. Mr. Fioravanti was never on site to confirm that. So he's using our survey data. And if he was using our survey data, he would see 88.2 spot shot. We took that point, we labeled it on the plan for a reason, because we did look at the cross-sectional diagram. And not to bore everybody, we've already been down this road. We did see that the floodplain and the base flood elevation does vary across our property. So that's why if you look in the background of this, you'll see that we measured to the corner of the house based on where this cross-section hits. That's that 42.5. That 42.5, if worst case scenario is 88.2 on the floodplain, base flood elevation, that is exactly where, based on our field data, that 88.2 hits, and it's still off the house. I will add, I know it's not part of the conversation, but the proposed finished floor elevation, is still 2 feet above this. Right. They were still constructing this as if they were in the floodplain, even though they were not. I know we're not looking at a safety thing, even though a lot of people have alluded to safety.
How many feet is the 88.2 mark from the house?
If we were to go 88.2, it's approximately 3 feet off the house. So it's still off the house. All of the testimony about this being field data and field verified, and you can see he's doing equal spacing everywhere he goes between the contours. That doesn't happen because he's ignoring this 88.2 field shot. Wasn't on site, can't confirm it. So this is based on our field data. This is accurate to within an inch, which is less than a tenth. And we have a signed sealed survey as Exhibit A7. It's been part of this record from the very beginning. Now, I will add one more point. When we went out there, we did this in the fashion that you develop a site. First thing you do is you go out there and you do a wetlands investigation. You have a wetlands guy go out there, he flags the wetlands. He has no idea what we're doing on this property. He goes out there, he flags the wetlands, puts his seal on it. We have a signed seal report from a wetland specialist. Then we do a field survey. They field locate all the flags for the wetlands, and they field locate all the topography, the boundary, and everything else. They still don't know what we're doing. So we then laid out a house, and the first plan we came in with had a house that was proposing to encroach into the floodplain. So we were acknowledging that you're allowed to develop into the floodplain. To Mr. Connor's point, you are allowed to develop into the floodplain, not the floodway. Your ordinance has certain provisions. We heard your concerns. We heard the residents' concerns. We scrapped that idea. We developed a plan based on the base flood elevation as us being completely out of it. So we pulled the house completely out of it. We developed a plan that was still developing, as we don't need to go back to square one of the constraints on the site not giving us a building envelope. But this is the plan that we came up with based on the systematic way of developing this property. So you start with the wetlands, you start with the floodplain, you map it on the plan. Yes, there's a note on the plan about graphical plotting.
Yeah, let's put that to bed. once for all.
That's and Mr. Fioravanti, I can go probably through Mr. Fioravanti's plans too. I'm sure he see it. They're known as they're notes that we put on a concept plan that basically says it's a cover your know what note that basically says until we do the field survey, until we have this, it never came off of the plan. If that was graphical plotting, you guys have seen the GIS maps. That graphical plotting of that is out here, and it has no reference to the 88. The fact that everyone keeps talking about 88 is basically negating the graphical part of it because we're referring to a base flood elevation that's based on a field survey that's pulled from the cross-sectional map. So once you start talking 88, the whole graphical part goes out the window. Because if you're graphical, this looks exactly like you look at the GIS map, and this whole property appears to be in the floodplain because we don't need to go back to that, but it's graphical plotting. They didn't have the benefit of a field survey. The base flood elevation is a studied stream. It's the zone. We go on the stream, we find the cross-section. This cross-section was laid in by AutoCAD. We measured it off. We did the same exercise that Mr. Fioravanti did, and we came up with 88.2 as a worst-case scenario, and we're still out of it. So everything that we have done is sound engineering practice. We were not trying to look at this from a reverse way of saying, all right, if they're 0.2 lower, they're in the floodplain. Our survey's accurate to within less than 1/10. We laid out the house to be out of it. Our stormwater feature, a lot of people are concerned about the stormwater. That whole concern about it hitting the house and redirecting around the house, filling up the basin. First of all, our bottom of our basin is above the base flood elevation of the 100-year flood storm. So the basin's never going to fill with water. And at the outskirts, everyone knows that the floodplain, like the floodway, you'll see the current goes pretty fast on this. As you move away from the center line of the stream, there's basically no velocity around this edge. That's why you see all the debris laid out after a storm of where it lays to. If it's going to be up at this part, first of all, if it even touches the house, which our testimony is that it's not going to happen, not in, Mr. Fioravanti said a couple of times, in the event that my survey is correct, we're saying our survey is correct. That's what we're here for. I mean, our survey put a seal on it. He said it's accurate to within 1/10. He did this based on sound engineering practices. We're standing here tonight. I'm putting my seal on the plan. The surveyor put his seal on the plan. This is where the base flood elevation is. So the house was designed to be out of it. We're not proposing anything that we're trying to creep into the floodplain. We're staying 100% out of it, and we're providing 200%. A lot of people are saying that trees. We're doing the trees as extra measures. The rain garden itself meets the stormwater criteria. We're adding the trees. We're adding a bunch of features, trying to be a good neighbor, trying to enhance the benefit to the developing this property. And I think that's basically. I have one more note. Hold on.
Yeah, one thing, and to your point, the survey that we did, the field survey as depicted on our plans, was dated January 21 and January 22 of 2021, correct?
Correct.
Long in advance of when the plans were actually developed, either plan. The first plan that you talked about where the house was partially in the floodplain, and then the second one that's in front of the board tonight that has it removed. So
Correct.
you were not trying to fashion a result by having a survey meet your design plans. It was the other way around. You had the survey done first, and then you did the plans.
That is correct.
Okay.
Better said than I did. Yeah, so the whole thing was designed in accordance with the township procedure. We were just using what we can do to develop the property without being in the floodplain. And I think that's the thing. I mean, the biggest thing I want you to draw from this exhibit, I know this was kind of hammered in today, but this is not accurate. This is not how it appears in the field. And Mr. Fioravanti did not do an on-site survey to say that these contours are equally spaced. So if this is where 88 is, and this is where 89 is, this is where 88.2 is. we have it circled right here, 88.2 survey spot shot. He's using one of my exhibits, but ignoring the field located data for an approximation technique, which it's just not accurate. Sure.
May I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Giannotti? So there's been this conflicting testimony as to the base flood elevation. How does your calculation affect the delineation of the wetland buffer area that had been previously discussed in earlier testimony?
Wetland buffer and floodplain are two completely different natural resource protection standards. So the wetland buffer is based off of, and I'm not sure if they have it up here. I could pull. So the wetland buffer, you'll see that this is, you see the wetland flag, we have it labeled as wetland flag 1-4. That area is a 100-foot offset of the wetland itself. Now, it coincides with the floodplain because it runs along the stream, and your natural resource protection standards require the protection of the floodplain over the wetlands. So basically, the floodplain is more important than the wetlands. So we are not proposing any disturbance to the floodplain or floodway. You guys categorize them the same by your ordinance. We are proposing disturbance to the wetland buffer, but that is outside of the floodplain.
Thank you.
Sure. Yes.
Mhm.
It's not in the floodplain. I'm going to say that I'm accurate and it shouldn't be withdrawn.
Does sound.
I did. I'm saying that Vince Fioravanti did not access the site and he did not provide a signed sealed survey showing that his points are by any means more accurate than the survey we provided, signed, sealed, and already exhibit A7. So I have no reason to believe that my surveyor is inaccurate as a licensed professional surveyor in the state of Pennsylvania with GPS data and tolerances within 1 inch. You can make a plan, do anything you want. We provided a signed sealed survey from a subconsultant that we didn't see before we overlaid the plan. I will provide raw data, and I would ask that Mr. Fioravanti provide his raw field data as well, but I have no reason to believe that Vince Fioravanti's survey is more accurate than mine. And are you insinuating that Vince Fioravanti's survey is more accurate than the one we provided as a signed sealed survey? Is that your testimony? Well, I'm just.
He doesn't testify.
Just trying to be a lawyer.
There's a little hypothetical. It's not start fighting.
It's over now.
I saw his butt cheeks right out about 2 inches when he yelled at that guy.
It's-
Oh, your question is a little bit hypothetical.
Correct.
He's an
You weren't
expert.
yelling that way. I
You
want the
can-
drama with it.
I mean, I think what you're asking is if he's wrong and if the house as
Yeah.
drawn is in the floodplain, it should be withdrawn. That's the question.
And he's saying he's not wrong, and he knows it is a hypothetical to me.
Well, but he's an expert.
You can ask hypotheticals to experts. You can't ask it to like a lay witness or a fact witness, but you can ask that. That is proper.
Yeah, revised.
Devised. Yes, correct. Correct. Yes, sir. Correct. 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 Mr. Fioravanti left the wrong date on his plan tonight. It happens.
I think we moved past that part.
It's if it was by if it, oh, I will Mr. Fanning, if it was by graphical plotting, it would not follow the ADA contour. That negates itself right there. And I think any professional would agree that if by graphical plotting, that line would not appear to follow the ADA contour. That's
Mhm.
I'm gonna
Mhm, no,
what in reference to exhibit VF5. That is correct. So what I meant by that, and what I correctly, if you were, I don't think you were looking at the exhibit because it wasn't turned to you. What I said is if you are using our data, contours are not evenly spaced. So Mr. Fioravanti, to your point, is evenly spacing contours. So right there, this is erroneous because you cannot space contours evenly. You follow the grade of the site, which is based on our field data, and better based on a field located spot shot of 88.2, which we correctly followed and also highlighted with a leader. That's what, so you're right. You can't, contours are not evenly spaced, to your point.
okay.
Do we really need to go there?
Come on, Vince. No one. Right. I don't want to hear, I don't want to hear, I don't want to hear, I think so.
So we did use the topography, and you could see, talk about contours not being evenly spaced. Of course, you can see the yellow line, that's the 88, and you can see the 89, and you can see the distance between the contours varies, right? We used to do this before computers. There's a sea of spot elevations, and you calculate where these even elevations are, and that's where you get the contour lines. Now, there is one elevation, 88.2 right here, and it's very close to where 88 is. So that just gives me a piece of information right where my pencil's pointing. Right at that spot is 88.2, and way up here is 89. And it doesn't go past 89, or I'd have a circle of 89 in here. So from this 88 all the way to that 89, you can assume, and it's relatively reasonable to assume this, because that's why these calculations, these contours were calculated so that, but you can see the steepness of this slope from 89 to 88, the grade's coming down there. So it might go a little bit less steep here and then more steep there, but between these contours, that's the average grade between the two. Now, the only spot elevation I have is right there, right? Now that happens to be very close to 88. So right in this little spot, it's a little steep there. That doesn't mean over here that it's also exactly that steep. As a matter of fact, the average grade between these two contours is shown here. And the average, if I use that average grade, then 88.2 is over here. I don't have a spot elevation anywhere in here. But I know that on the average, from 88 to 89, each one's about 7 feet apart. If they could be squeezed a little bit tighter here, then it'll be even wider up here. So as a general rule between the contours, it really is essentially an average.
That's your point.
And I only got one spot right here. That doesn't mean it's 88.2 down here. What I know is the average, and I go up a tenth or two and I'm hitting the house.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to point that out.
Anything else?
question? Can I have my exhibit A4 back?
They're just blow ups of marked exhibits.
Is that done?
I think we're up to A18. I don't know that we need to if it's just the same thing. And John, do you have an objection to that? Correct. Yeah, it's
Take.
okay. So, and there's what, 3? So we do A18, A19, and A20.
We have A18 already. That's
Do we?
been 8 aerial photos of McDonald property.
Oh, so this is 19. Okay.
Yes.
And could you just say which is which? Just so I can write it down. Okay.
Microphone, Ed.
A19 would be the highlighted general notes of zoning plan, page 1, Exhibit A4. Exhibit A20 would be the second page of Exhibit A4, which is the URSAM plan, highlighting natural resource condition notes. And A21 would be the highlighted survey notes of Exhibit A7.
Yeah, we
Yeah. Any objection, Ed?
you have any problem with that?
Ah,
Yeah.
no.
I guess at this point, we could ask for more public comment. then. Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We saw earlier photos of the rear lot there that you guys are proposing to, I guess it's in the flood. It's in the wetland buffer and it's in the flood. It's all disturbed, it's all grass. Is that your recollection of the site as well?
Our site, the photos from the neighboring property looking at our site. Yes, correct.
All right, and it's grass all the way up to the edge of the stream?
It's grass. Yes.
Okay, and there's no significant vegetation other than grass?
Yes.
So it's all disturbed?
It's all disturbed.
The stormwater system that you designed is based upon less than 5,000 square feet,
Correct.
which is per the zoning criteria.
Correct.
What storm event is that to?
It takes up to the 2-year storm volume, but we designed the system to manage up to the 50-year storm.
To the which storm?
50-year storm.
50 years.
Yeah, in that basin.
In that basin. And at no point does that basin infringe upon the floodplain?
Correct.
The discharge point does not infringe upon the floodplain?
Uses an existing discharge point through an outlet control structure that's proposed.
Does all the impervious surface that you're designing go to that basin?
No, there's a portion of the driveway which will run off into the rock swale and then into the existing riprap basin, all within the tolerances of the ordinance for rate control and volume control.
Is there a possibility to direct that to the basin?
We could look into that, but based on the grading and then the trying to keep the basin above the base flood elevation as well, there's a portion of runoff that's going to be quote unquote uncontrolled.
That's all the questions I have at this point.
Anybody have any additional questions?
Well, I'll do a follow-up to Matt's question there. What about the use of pervious pavements?
We could look into that as well. We're definitely willing to provide pervious paving.
Anybody else? Yeah, Barb, anything? Okay. I guess we could go back to public comment. We have a few minutes left. If anybody wants to speak, I know James or Mr. Bach spoke. Is there anybody else out there that wants to come up and say something? Give your name, address, and be sworn in. There's the microphone.
Yes, it's on. Hi, I'm Lynn McDonald.
Name and address.
Address is 2029 Farmview Drive. 2029 Farmview. I do. As I said, hi, my name is Lynn McDonald, and yes, I'm Scott's sister. I've lived in the township for 38 years. I've owned most of that time 2 properties, and have seen a lot of changes during that time, obviously, as we all have. When I moved here in the 80s, there were no grocery stores, no banks, no drugstores, dry cleaners. They were all in the borough or other townships. There was no firehouse. In fact, the firehouse is a tractor trailer parked in a lot. It's now a giant shopping center. I've seen all the wetlands, the woodlands, the farmlands bought up, optioned, and then turned into developments. And in fact, I live in one of those developments, as I'm sure many of you do too. Imagine the changes then that since the 50s, when the land along Silver Creek started to be developed, that have occurred. I'm just talking about the changes I've seen in the late 80s. Again, in the 70s, when Scott's house was built, there were more changes. I understand that more than 400 properties drain into the watershed for this creek, and 100 or so are downstream from this proposed building by the decks. That's significant. Stormwater management in this area does not appear to have kept up with the development. In the last 4 or 5 years since my brother's family has been in this house, the increased runoff into the creek and subsequent flooding is huge. In fact, when I first wrote this statement, it was back in September, and we just had the day before a heavy rain, but it was a short period. So everyone's talking about how much rain has happened in a 24-hour period. But a lot of these storms are very intense in a very short period of time now, as we see climate changing happening, right? And it was, you know, you might have a stream going down your driveway. Well, their creek was totally full. It wasn't flooded, but just from that short half an hour heavy burst. So these storms and the impact that you see on them are wide reaching. And I know that you know that because you saw a lot of the videos and the pictures, right? It's not really a surprise. Can you imagine what Hurricane Ida did, right? It was a lot of water. I said, can you imagine what the rain from Hurricane Ida did? It was a lot of water.
Ida. Yeah.
Ida. How did it get this bad? Well, certainly there's climate change. Storms are stronger, more frequent, longer duration. But we got there one street, one driveway, one house, one shed, one pool, one variance at a time. In increasing the flow to this creek, it cannot handle anymore. We live in a country of laws, a state of laws, and a township of laws and ordinances. Here in LMT, we can't build on a floodplain. We're required to protect the wetlands. We have a limit on the amount of impervious surfaces we can have on our properties. We have specific setbacks and distances to other property lines. The decks are asking for variances on all of these. As a court of law, there has to be a burden of proof shown by the prospective homeowner that these variances will cause no harm in this township and the 100 or so properties downstream from this location. In my opinion, this has not been proved. What has been proved is that it would be a disaster. Allowing to build on this lot is a direct violation to the very ordinances that you, the zoning board, are personally entrusted to uphold. The last time we met, we had a very contentious conversation and questioning from the other side against the very homeowner that's just trying to protect these ordinances. I don't understand why we think that allowing this building, disturbing the surrounding land and disrupting the water flow, even if it only added one more drop of water to this creek, is in anyone's best interest. Certainly not the McDonald's and neighbors. Silver Lake homeowners, or the townships. I'm here to urge you to do the right thing, please, and deny this request. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody online?
Yes, I can bring Nancy in now.
Bring her in. Name and address.
See? Nancy's in the room with us now.
Yes, this is Nancy Powers, and I have requested party status.
Hold on, I have a hearing problem. Can't hear you. Are you on a telephone?
I am. Can you hear me now?
You speak as loud as you can and clearly.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
I can.
I can remove my headset and just put my phone on. Hang on one second. Is this any better?
Much, much better. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Nancy Powers. I have requested party status.
Oh, you got to get sworn in first. Hang on. Name, address, and be sworn in.
Nancy Powers, 31 Edgewood Road.
And do you solemnly swear the testimony about to give will be the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay.
So I'm at 31 Edgewood Road. I'm on the corner of Woodland Drive and Edgewood Road. We've been here for 31 years. And I think I'm sorry, I don't recall the name of the person that spoke prior, but I echo everything she said. And I guess to me, what is the most puzzling is that there's no burden of proof that has been demonstrated by the people that desire to build a home on that lot, that there is no negative output from building that home. It has been baffling to me the amount of time that we've all taken to discuss this and disputed it, and that it's still to me controversial. I don't believe that they have given any burden of proof why this should be granted a variance. I can tell you in the 30-something years we've lived here, I've seen that creek it has completely been eroded. My backyard, we have 2 lots. We have a tennis court, and the creek backs up to that. And behind that tennis court where our property extends, I'd say in the last 5 years, I have flooding so badly that the vegetation, trees have been uprooted in any storm. It floods out my backyard there. I heard someone mention something about a turtle. One of the storms that we had this summer, I found one of those endangered, rare, large turtles swimming in my pool. We put it in a carrier and we brought it back down to the creek and put it down there. And it looked like a raging river, the way that creek had been handled during a storm. We have deer, we have foxes, not to mention everything else that people said prior. I won't repeat it. But I cannot imagine any neighbor wants to build a home where you are opposed by everybody in the vicinity. And I agree, they will be under a microscope. Not selfishly worrying about the depreciation of my property value. I think that I moved to Lower Makefield, again, for all the reasons everyone else stated. And again, I really beg of all of you to do the right thing. If this house wasn't granted grandfather status, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. It would be thrown out before it ever got into discussion. So it's kind of appalling to me that this has been going on for months and months and months. And I personally don't feel, listening to both sides, that the party that chooses to build on this has given any further proof and accommodation that this will not disrupt everything that has already been stated. So I just wanted to give my opinion that I am vehemently against this, and I, like the prior person, I beg of this zoning committee to do the right thing for all those reasons.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we got another. Did she ask for party status? Did she?
I thought she said she already had it.
Yeah. She's already got it. Yeah.
Let's see.
Okay.
We have Luke in the room with us now too.
Well, she can have party status. Are you asking for party status? She's, all right. Do you have a problem, huh? She lives right there.
Why don't you go ahead and say something?
Luke's in the
Okay.
room with us now.
All right, do we have our next person?
Hi, this is Luke Butler, 2320 Weinman Way.
Okay, be sworn in.
I'm not seeking party status. I don't know if I need to be sworn in or.
The testimony about to give will be the truth, so help you God.
Yeah.
You hear that?
Yeah. So, can you all hear me?
Go ahead.
Thanks. So my family, we're members of the Makefield Lakes Community Association. We support the association's objection to the development that's under consideration, but we don't live on the lake. I'm actually calling to offer a little bit of a different perspective from that of people who live right on the lake or even in the surrounding neighborhood where we live. My perspective just comes from visiting the lake many, many times with our little kids over the past several years. And so I just want to share with the board and make sure you understand when you're thinking about this, that the lake, it lies about 2,500 feet downstream from the proposed development. And it's much more, as a lake, as a resource, it's much more than a privately owned lake that benefits a couple dozen lakeside homeowners. So it is surrounded by private property, but it's actually functioning as the township's only public park with a lake of any size in it. There's about 1,000 feet of publicly accessible shoreline that the public's welcome to use and very often does use. There's 3 public access points that have nearby street parking, and the association keeps signs posted that welcome the public and explain the rules for using the site and being safe and everything like that. I take our kids there regularly and fish, splash around, look for frogs and turtles and snakes and birds and stuff like that. And over about the last 3 years, I've either observed and spoken with a lot of people from outside the immediate neighborhood who come to use the lake. It's people from LMT. It's actually people from our surrounding towns. Even people from New Jersey come to use the lake. And it pops up on social media because it's a good catch and release fishing lake, and there's very good access for kid fishing. There's some neat bird sightings that happens and things like that. So, there's non-motorized boating the lake is used for. People kayak, canoe, stand-up paddleboarding. And then in addition to those aquatic resources that are very uncommon in our township, there's benches overlooking the lake. There's a walking trail, garbage cans that are maintained. It's kept really nice and clean for people. And about 100 feet or so of the eastern shore was recently even rebuilt and replanted by a local Eagle Scout. So my point is, it's a great public resource, this lake, that will be affected by the proposed development. Even though it is privately owned and maintained, it's open to everybody, and the local neighbors love to see people there. And so for any of the board members who think the development might have a negative impact on Silver Lake, or even risk having a negative impact on Silver Lake, I just ask you to please really weigh that negative impact heavily because of how many different people use the site and because of how uncommon of a resource it is for our township. Thank you.
Okay. It sounds like you have a great organization there you're working with. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
There's no other public comment online.
There is? No. Oh,
There's not.
anybody in the audience? Would have been.
Sure, you'd have to go.
With Justin saying that his survey could be 1 inch off or 0.08 inch off, and the property being 3 feet off, is the property beyond the margin of error of his survey? Or if his survey is 1 inch off, would that exactly, with his data, put the property in the floodplain?
He says his survey is right on.
No, he said it could be within 1 inch off.
Well, that's evidence that we've heard two different margins of error. We've heard.
We would, yeah.
Right, but what I'm saying is if his is 1 inch off, they're 3 feet off. Does that move the floodwater onto the property where they're building the house? Is he beyond the margin of error of his own survey is the question that I'm asking.
He said he was right on. Possible, there is a margin of error.
I knew it was.
So-
gonna be.
So besides closing, I think you guys are going to be producing the field survey, the sealed survey.
So we're
Are
gonna,
we meeting December 7th?
And then anything else from you, Ed? Okay. Obviously, I'm assuming would reserve the right for cross, but nothing additional otherwise. We have a full agenda on the 7th.
Finishing in December?
We do have the 21st open, which we keep open if we can cancel it, obviously, because it's Christmas week.
Yeah,
But we do have that open that we can have this meeting. Would not be a special meeting, but it would be special in that this would be the only thing on the agenda.
is everybody available here? Well, there's a meeting.
We'll do a Secret Santa maybe. Secret Santa after the meeting. We got to vote first.
I don't have a problem with coming here the 21st if it
Okay.
works for
And
everybody.
is that good for everyone? Ed, that's good for you. John,
You
everything?
guys out there,
Okay.
anybody else is coming, Jim? You all right?
All right.
All right.
So then we would just, then we just need a vote to continue this hearing
Right.
to the to December 21st.
Okay, all those in favor? All right.
Aye.
All right. Any discussions? So let me know. The ayes have it. It's continued to the 21st. Thank you very much, everybody.
And we'll be back next week for a regular meeting.